Well, first, Kevin, I just want to say thank you for coming here and spending the time and doing this Diversity Council Q&A with us. Well, I would like to hit on the diversity component first. And I think it's important, as I've done research on diversity and just talking with people, everybody kind of has their own definition. So what would you say would be your definition of diversity, and what do you think is showing a commitment to diversity, and what's that mean?
Yeah, it's very broad, but I think ultimately what it comes down to is how we treat others and inclusiveness, but ultimately how we see the world, how those experiences have been shaped by our own experiences, and then how we want that reflected in whether it's our workplace, our communities, our neighborhoods, our homes, that we're treating other people. And so it really comes down to cultural competence, understanding, a bit of enlightenment, and then just treating people with respect. So I can't really couch diversity other than saying it's a collection of all those, having an open mind and trying to be as inclusive as possible.
Okay. And being with the Cleveland Browns and then part of the NFL, how do you feel about the initiatives they have set forth with that? Or do you feel like there's room for improvement? Or do you think they have a pretty good system as far as initiatives for diversity?
Yeah, all professional sports teams, let me say this, in all big industries or kind of big machines, there's always room for improvement. And when you're working in a complex world like NFL, the NBA, whatever that might be, there's checks and balances that oftentimes have to be put in place or can be put in place in order to expedite a process, right? So in the NFL, we've had a number of programs that have helped identify coaches, particularly minority coaches, that would be good head coaches or coordinators. We've had programs that have been put in place to identify African American and minority executives and female executives, and all those have really done, for lack of a better term, is they've put people in positions to establish relationships they wouldn't have had.
Okay.
And so when it comes down to hiring processes, oftentimes it comes down to, are people competent? Have they demonstrated success in the past of what they've done? But then also, do they have a relationship with folks that are making the hire? And that's really important, to have a trusted relationship when you bring somebody, particularly a head coach or executive, in an organization who you're typically paying a lot of money to, investing in, and that you're going to kind of turn over your brand to a bit. It's important that they have that trusted relationship.
Okay. Yeah, I think trust is huge as far as
it's really
the
big.
diversity component. And communication, I think, would be the second part of that.
Communication, and it's also about comfort level, right? So,
right.
I often joke that I probably wasn't in the same fraternity as the owner of my team. We just probably weren't. We didn't run the same circles.
Right.
We just haven't had the same life experiences, whether that's because of our age or our cultural differences where we grew up. So having those environments where you can kind of cross-pollinate is really important, so you can begin to build a relationship and trust.
Right. So in the program, we have experiences outside the classroom as well. But other than most people just working internships in undergrad, we haven't really been able to experience being in the higher up positions yet in the industry. So since you have you seen firsthand how bringing more diversity to an organization or to a company has been beneficial in the workplace, as far as maybe just having new ideas, creativity, and even reaching, I know teams and brands need to reach certain demographics, and maybe having that diversity could help, but have you experienced that firsthand?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, there's a level of just excellence or expertise that you have to have. So it's not as if because XYZ person is a minority or female that we need to make a spot for them. No, they need to earn their way in.
Right.
It just happened to be a female, a minority, or whatever it is that we're looking for. Places that I've worked, like in Seattle, we had with the Seahawks and Sounders, we had at one point in time 3 females on our executive team, and it was really cool. Not only just from my perspective, looking up and saying, "Wow, that's neat," but just to have a different thought process when we talked about things that were. And by the way, like our CFO, right? So these aren't these are big positions and making big decisions and leading lots of people. So those are important. And here with the Cleveland Browns, a guy named Sashi Brown, he attended Hampton, African American, 37 years old, attended Harvard Law School. Myself, Ray Farmer, who's our assistant general manager, all African American. We have a number of diverse candidates in our workforce. We don't have any senior managers that are female yet. But it's always nice to be in an environment where people bring a different thought process to the table. Right. And we all bring different thought processes to the table because we all have different experiences.
Right.
So having diversity from that standpoint, I think will improve a business, and it will also allow us to reach out to our customers in a different way, because we can at least empathize, understand, or put ourselves in the position of a customer to deliver something better for them that's more well-rounded.
Okay, because even with the NFL, I know the viewership of women, I think, has been rising in the NFL. Have you all had to do anything to meet that, or you feel like maybe the initiatives you already set forth?
No, I mean, a lot of that has to do, I mean, some of that's strategic in the way that the league is set out initiative. Okay. But, right, you bring up a really great point. I'll talk about, the decision for kids to play football. About 85% of those decisions are made by females, by moms. Right. Whether it's to play football or to pull them out of football. It's really hard for me as a dad to have that conversation, right? Because I've never been a mom, right? So it's great to have, the female voice in our office who is a mom whose kid is either playing football or seeing the inside. That's one really easy example. I'll give you another kind of trivial example. When we talk about things like service around the stadium and we talk about restrooms, well, guys really could care less about how long. I mean, our lines are really usually not that long,
right?
And we don't take as long, right? So. But to have that female voice in our office, especially, again, at a senior leadership standpoint, they say, hold on, pause for a second. Restrooms aren't just restrooms. They're not universal. Think about it from a female standpoint as well. Oh, wow, yeah, you're right. That's not our experience, so it's great to have that conversation.
Right, okay, I understand that. Yeah. And to move a little bit away from the diversity component, but just the leadership component, because this is something that just intrigues me. I just think it's good to know when you do get hired or when you're in the workplace how your boss conducts himself or herself as a leader. And I know you mentioned in our session prior to that you do focus on developing that person and caring about that person. And if you all have a mutual understanding, usually it leads to good results.
Right.
But what would you say you would need from that employee, or what is it that they could do to create that type of relationship? Is there a certain qualities about them that they could have, or?
Yeah, I think it's most important that an employee shows initiative, right? Okay. But not be overzealous. Like, don't come in and say, look, I'm going to be the general manager in 2 years. Well, the truth is, no, you're not, right? So that employee, in this case, if you're getting your first job or second job, to really have a good understanding of scale and pace and where you actually fit into the pecking order, what you need to learn. Identifying those others in the organization that can help you learn that. Being aggressive without being combative, if that makes any kind of that makes sense. So I guess a better way of saying that is being ambitious without being combative. Okay. And then being really humble in terms of the approach. Like, okay, here's what I know I don't know. Here's what I want to learn, and here's why. And it's typically, if you could say, the why is not necessarily about me personally, although that would be a product of it. It's about how I can learn and really help advance this organization, this team, this whatever you work for, so that I get better and I elevate our organization at the same time. Those are the kind of things that I really appreciate. What I don't appreciate, though, is when someone comes and says, look, I'm going to be here for 2 years and then I want to be vice president of this, and this. And you're like, okay, we're dealing in a la-la land here because you don't have a really good grasp of what it means and what it will take.
And that brings up a good point, because I think as you're a student, you're going through the program, you start to learn a lot about yourself and about your strengths and weaknesses. And I think that's something that is sometimes hard, to know what your strength is, or maybe know what it is perceived by others. You might think this is a strength, you might think this is a weakness, but in reality, maybe it's vice versa or whatever. Is there a strategy that you've had with your experiences to know how to properly assess your strengths and weaknesses and maybe how to manage those?
Yeah, a bit of that is just having the opportunity to kind of stress test as much as you can. So finding volunteer opportunities where you think you might be good, working on projects where you where you think you might be weak, right? So you get to work side by side with someone who's better at that. But it really comes down to experience, because experience ultimately develops and develops confidence, right? In areas. It's also important to have other people in your life that are always going to tell you the truth. We talk about hype men all the time in our office, and if you have a hype man that's always hyping you up, but they never tell you the truth, they're really not doing you any good, right? So you need to have people who can tell you the truth from time to time and have candid conversations, but you know that they really care about you, so that you trust what they're telling you. That always helps in development. So anytime when it comes to staff development, it really starts with candid conversation and a trusted relationship.
Okay. And there was an interesting part of your session at Sports Business Forum, and you hit on some of the things that you look for in candidates, whether it's internships, jobs, whatever. And you mentioned, and I know one was Nordstrom, but there was another, I don't know if it was an athlete or, I know there was other things that you looked for that really spoke to you on a resume. Do you mind kind of going through those?
No, that's a great question. So when if I get a resume, there are 4 things that automatically will move someone up to the top of the pile. Doesn't mean they're going to get an interview, but I will certainly pay more attention to the resume. If they worked at Nordstrom's, I believe that at Nordstrom's you learn great customer service. You understand how to sell, but more importantly, you understand putting the customer first and foremost. If you worked at Disney, really a lot of the same things apply, right? You understand what it means to work for a great brand, and you're always on. So you're always a bit in character throughout that process. There's a saying that you can't teach a duck to be an eagle, right? So some people they're a duck, and that's it. They can't be an eagle. But I think Disney helps to develop that. If you've been a student athlete in college, I'm a bit biased because I was a student athlete, so I understand what it takes to particularly stay 4 years and be a student athlete and grind away, and also be a successful student while balancing your athletics. And the 4th one is if you went to Ohio University through any of our sports or athletic administration programs. And again, I'm a bit biased because I went through it myself, but I understand the rigor that is involved in that, and the commitment, and then the support system that is around those students.
Okay. Yeah. And speaking to experiences, and I know that's a huge thing, obviously. I mean, when you're going for a job experience, sometimes, especially in the sport industry, there's a lot of internships or entry-level positions that don't pay. They pay very minimal. Do you have any advice for those that are going that route but might not have the financial means to take a position that is not going to help pay the bills?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I would suggest that we actually become a class at some point in time or a workshop. It's really important for young folks to manage their finances. And what I mean by that is oftentimes in our industry, those entry-level positions don't pay very well at all. And especially those internships are, $8, $9 an hour, a lot of hours. And so, I even know some folks who have significant jobs in professional sports and still have a second job, right?
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I said, right? So the industry can be notorious for underpaying because it can. But it's important that, if I could give anybody any piece of advice, is to be in a position to make your own decision. What I mean by that is to manage your finances, particularly your debt load, in a way that doesn't pigeonhole you from not being able to take a certain job that you really want to because it's not paying at a certain level.
Right.
We've all have friends or been in the position where you're like, I got to take this job because I owe this much on my credit card, right? And the job you really want is around the corner. That's a tough road to hoe because you're never going to really probably catch back up to that cohort of colleagues who started a year, 2, 3 years ahead of you in that industry. So financial management of your personal finances is really important. And the last thing on that point is, I've seen a lot of interns who still live at home and have leaned on their mom or dad. So having that second support system is really important as well. That's not true for everyone, but it's just kind of a good ism for folks to know is that you're probably going to need a little bit of help for a little while.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And this is kind of biased for me too, because I was a student athlete, not for 4 years due to a knee injury. But how do you feel? I'm just interested to hear about those experiences and how that helped shape you in the workplace. I feel like
Right.
when you're a student athlete, you learn a lot of teamwork, you learn a lot of no excuses.
Right.
And I think one of the most important things is you learn how to be coached
Uh-huh.
and how to accept constructive criticism. So
Right.
how have those experiences helped you throughout your, and you learn to work with all different types of people.
I think that's actually, it's probably goal setting, being a good teammate, but it's working with different types of people that really helped me most, and understanding what it means to persevere, understanding hard work. I mean, that's first and foremost. If you're there till midnight working on a project and I need to see you back at 6 a.m, it's just like you need to do that, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully that's part of who you are. It's part of your ethos and DNA. But being a student athlete, I think most importantly it was working with different coaches, and then working with different players, and those students being from all over the country. So we all brought different experiences to the table, and you think some of these guys are like, you're crazy, right? And I'm sure they thought my perspective was crazy. But we learned to figure it out and work together and reach a common goal, and that oftentimes happens in the workplace.
Okay. And how did you, a lot of times in the sport industry, you have to move around. Sometimes you move around by yourself, sometimes you have family.
Yeah.
Was there strategy as far as the decision making and where you wanted to, because you were all the way on the other side of the country, now you're in the Midwest. How did that play into your life, and how, sometimes I try to differentiate between what's going to make me personally happy and career happy, and ultimately everybody would want both, but have you been able to kind of do both as far as location and work-life balance?
I personally, I have.
Okay.
I kind of have two homes. I've got 2.5 homes. Born here in Ohio, lived here till I was 7, then moved out to Seattle, stayed there till high school was over, came back to Ohio, did all my schooling, went back to Seattle, really got my career going. And then also my dad's in Southern California, so I spent a lot of time in Southern Cal. So I'm kind of used to being on the move. But as it relates to the career, at a certain point in time, I think everyone has to make that decision. Like, am I at a point where I'm not learning anymore and I'm not growing anymore? And once that happens, then it's probably time to move on for your own self, and probably even for the organization, because you're not getting any more out of it, and they're probably not getting much more out of it from you. But there's a ceiling there, and so you just kind of have to know. For me, personally, just kind of thinking of markets and brands that I want to work with. You kind of think, okay, have I worked in a large market like New York or LA? Have I worked in a mid-sized market like a Seattle, a Cleveland? Have I worked in a small market? Just understanding the different dynamics in markets is, I think, really important as we grow and mature and as a professional. But ultimately, when it comes, as a father of 3 and a husband, my family, their happiness has to match wherever I am. So they kind of come first. If I were single, I'd probably move around a lot more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's why I think upon graduation is a good time for a lot of students to just go. Right.
Absolutely. Go. Do it while you can.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
To bring back the diversity component real quick, would there be any advice you would give? Because, like you said, we look at diversity differently. Everyone does. But even for minority candidates or minority students, there's a lot we can learn from others as well. It's not just about them learning from us. So would there be any advice you would give to candidates that are thinking about coming here, or students that are here, or even in the workplace, about just what's important and how to navigate, and to just have an open mind to learn from others?
Yeah, I think the quality of having an open mind and being able to adjust is really, really important. Be agile and not be so rigid in a way that, because something is not the way that you expected, that it paralyzes you from being able to move forward.
Right.
And whether it's a plan that you had for yourself that might have got adjusted because something didn't go your way, or you find out that you have people that are working with you who are different race or have different sexuality from you. That can't stop you from moving forward, right? You've got to continue to just be agile enough to have a different look at a different perspective, and I think more importantly, value it for what that person has as they see it. That's really what it comes down to. Diversity is valuing others, and people often say treating them with kindness and caring, but I think it really comes down to value. And I think most importantly is when you don't, but you try to fake it, it comes across really quickly as not being authentic. So finding a way to be very authentic and caring and inclusive of others is critically important to not only your success in this industry, but I think success in life.
Yeah, my dad used to always say that if you aren't sure how to treat someone if they're different, just start by treating them like a human.
There you go.
And then you go from there.
Right. Yeah,
So
that's a great way to do it.
So don't pay attention to all the extras. It's that simple. So, well, do you have any other points that you would like to hit on at all, or anything about OU, the program?
Yeah, I think when it comes down to diversity, it always, I sound like an old person, but when I was growing up, people would always talk about policies that were slotting, right? So, and it was tough because you'd feel like, okay, this admissions program or this job would select so many women, so many minority candidates, and whatnot, and that's kind of gone by the wayside a bit. And I don't know if I want to say rightfully so. It has, because people now just understand that diversity is not about filling quotas. Right. It's really about making a richer experience for everybody involved. And so I would, as people graduate from this program and move on and become professionals, just consider that in your hiring decisions. Just consider that in the people that you're asking, survey questions of, or having in focus groups. It's just really important to have a wider spectrum of voice and conversation in order to get to what really is quickly changing into a different America. Whenever I go to Southern California, or even the West Coast, or New York or Chicago, when I go to big cities, it always surprises me how quickly the demographics of this country are changing.
Right.
And so we can be in our own little bubble from time to time and forget ultimately what the bigger picture is and who we're really truly talking to.
I agree. Well, Kevin, on behalf of Diversity Council and myself, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to spend with us, and we appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.